summertime. We are in the summer months, but you guys, we are celebrating America 250 from so many different powerful stories, powerful authors. And today, for the first time here at WMAL, the All American Book Club, we bring over to the show Patrick K. O'Donnell, historian. He is a military historian, best-selling author, and public speaker. And he's written 14 critically acclaimed books that recount the epic stories of America's wars from the Revolution to Iraq. And this is one of my favorite pieces, a fellow at Mount Vernon. He is the recipient of numerous national book awards. Please help me welcome to the show, Patrick K. O'Donnell. What an honor to have you here for the first time. And I love the fact that you were a fellow at Mount Vernon. I love Mount Vernon. Oh my gosh, so fun.
It's a great place. I'm honored to be on your show. I'm also to be honored to be a fellow at Mount Vernon. Yeah, senior fellow. I've been there twice for two projects. The first being The Indispensables, which is the book on John Glover's Marblehead Mariners that rode Washington across the Delaware. And then
Mm.
now I was in residence there, and I spent just a concentrated amount of time, you know, at Mount Vernon at the George Washington Library, finishing up
Yes.
Revolutionary Snipers, which is just a phenomenal book about George Washington's riflemen, who were the first members of the Continental Army and arguably the first special operators, because these men, in many cases, were they operated deep behind the lines, against the British, but also prior to the war, they would do long hunts basically into the wilderness beyond the Alleghenies and have to survive against hostile Native Americans and then the elements. And these are kind of the ultimate survivalists, the ultimate men that could just live in the woods for months at a time without anything. And then they carried a remarkable piece of technology, a Widowmaker, the Pennsylvania long rifle, which could,
Mhm.
was deadly accurate, hundreds of yards, unlike the traditional musket that most revolutionary soldiers carried at the time.
As you're talking about the special operators, if you will, back in that time period, and you fast forward, I think about our special operators, knowing that we're here, and I get to be surrounded in the great state of North Carolina by so many different military bases. You have MARSOC, you have Fort Bragg, you have, and I hear my husband's military history, and then I get to see it and live it here within a military community. The characteristics of our special operators that you saw and that you researched while you were at Mount Vernon, do you see those characteristics of those special operators then being carried over now into modern day?
Absolutely, the sort of the pioneering tactics that these men developed during the American Revolution carry over. It's imbued in the special operators today. But it's also the character that many of these men have today. I saw it firsthand as an embedded combat historian in the Battle of Fallujah, where I was first paired with Marine Special Operations Forces, Second Recon Battalion, and then the assault force that actually went house to house. I was with them in uniform, armed, and somehow survived that epic battle.
What was that like? What was that like for you to be?
It's pretty indescribable. It's for me. I've interviewed thousands of World War II veterans, many of them from the Pacific War, and it was similar to that in the sense that the enemy that we faced, which was kind of a Star Wars bar of international terrorists from all over the world, well trained, disciplined, and basically there to kill Americans. Um, it was in the sense very much like the Pacific War. It was a war of annihilation. It was a war. They were bunkered and very, very dedicated to killing us. And I was very lucky. The platoon that I was in went in with the battle with about some 70 men. We were down to 20 that were walking out of there. I mean, everybody was wounded, five killed in action. It was tremendous casualties, and some people wounded twice. But what I saw was really something that stayed with me forever. Men that would just were wounded. They would that would go AWOL from the aid station to join their buddies again and not let them down. It was incredible resolve and resilience, a real
Mhm.
tribute to the Marine Corps. And those men that I've witnessed there, they carried on the remarkable tradition of the Corps from Belleau Wood to Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and the Chosin Reservoir. The boys of Fallujah were right up there with all of them, and they were a remarkable generation of Americans.
I want to ask you personally, how did you come to become the powerful military historian that you are? What was it in Patrick that said, this is what I was going to become, this is what I was going to do? Was it just a personal passion, or did you have a legacy of military in your family that really just drove you to find out more, research more, tell more?
For me, it began when I was about 5 years old, and I went to the local library and picked up a book that was almost as heavy as I was. It was a book on World War One, and it was a photo history, and it weighed maybe 10 pounds. I'm here, this 35-pound kid, but I got just obsessed with it. And I was obsessed with history. I mean, all the other kids were looking at dinosaur books and stuff, and I was reading World War II history. And I dragged my parents to Civil War battlefields. I was into history since the beginning for me. This is a passion of mine. I've been a full-time author and historian for 27 years. I've written 14 books, and I haven't worked a day in that time, even though I spend a lot of time doing what I do. It's a passion. Every book that I've written has found me in one way or another. It's a journey, and I love the curiosity that comes with it, with finding something that nobody else has really looked at. All the
Right.
books that I've written are small stories about a small group of people that, in many cases, are just regular people before they enter the military or combat, and then they're driven by something, and they do some extraordinary things where they've changed history. And the books that I've written are on those kind of fault lines of where these individuals have changed history in whatever way. And it's remarkable. And the books that I've written tell a larger story
Yeah.
in most cases of a conflict or a time period.
I'm gonna hold up two of your books. This one is, I'm gonna highlight my father and I. Thanks to him, you're here because he said, I just finished
Thank
your
you.
assignment, and he's like, you've got to get it. And could you get him on the show? And I said, let me do a little digging, and that's why you were here. So I have this one, and then I also have this one. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and order all of your books off Amazon. For those who are watching, you can see this on the channel. But I wanted to ask you about this one, being more specific. I noticed that you said it took you more than 7 years combing through the National Archives. Is that correct? Did I read that right?
Yes. The book it took for a lot of time. I first that story I came across when I first wrote Operative Spies and Saboteurs back in the early 2000s, and that's sort of a remarkable story. Nobody had ever done anything on the OSS. This is the Office of Strategic Services. I'm a director there. I'm also the official historian, and I got that title because in 1999, 2000, I just went to the reunion and I started to interview these men and women of the OSS from World War II that they were the first special operators for
Yeah.
modern operators in World War II. It's also the precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency. They pioneered so much trade craft, and these were just the American citizens that were extraordinary that come together to fight, the greatest powers at the time, Nazi Germany and Japan. And they had zero training, and they have to develop everything on the fly. And I'm there, and I'm one of the first people to really record their stories because they kept their secrets. They've kept their vows of silence. And even though they didn't have to at that time, for the most part, most of it was declassified. And then I would go to the archives, the National Archives. I spent 3 decades there, combing through that information, trying to find, what these men and women did. And the Brenner assignment is really, you know, your books are kind of like your children. They're all favorites, but this book is a very special book to me because I was a volunteer embedded combat historian with the Marine Corps. I was in uniform, I was armed, and somehow survived Fallujah. And I interviewed all these OSS vets, and one of my favorite interviews was with a gentleman whose nickname was the Brain, and he was the case officer for most of the OSS operational group missions. These were sort of commando teams that went into northern Italy, and he organized them, parachuted them, and got them parachuted in. And I told him I wasn't sure what I was going to do after Fallujah. And I had a plan of going back to, I was going to go back into either Iraq or Afghanistan. And he said, don't, it's just too risky. He knew what happened to me, and I barely survived Fallujah with a book called We Were One, which is on the Commandant's, multiple Commandant's reading list. There was other professional reading, was private reading. It was on the platoon that I was in, the assault group. But he said, don't do it. You need to tell Howard's story in the story of the Brenner assignment and Steve Hall's story. And it was never done. And the Brenner assignment is really one of the most remarkable, incredible stories of World War II that had not been told until I wrote the Brenner assignment. And he convinced me not to go to Afghanistan and to somehow interview one of the main characters, the arguably the main character of the book, whose name was Howard Chappell. And Howard, of all the World War II veterans I interviewed, was a true badass.
Mm.
And unbelievable the things that he did. If you've ever seen the movie Gangster Squad, which is about the mafia after World War II in LA, he was part of the group that went after them, and he was absolutely fearless. And just went after Mickey Cohen and everybody else. And he's the kind of guy that would just show up in the middle of the night at Cohen's house with a Tommy gun in a dark room and confront him. And he was a guy that would never talk about the war.
Right.
And I always would call him and say, I'd love to interview you. It's, always say that's ancient history. This is the guy that really was there that, I mean, did things that are just extraordinary and would just downplay everything and blow it off. And he would always say to me, well, you have to come out here. And it was a blow off line. And he was always trying to get rid of me. And finally, I had the brain confront him. And I flew out to San Francisco and I had him on the phone. And it was the same story. And I finally said, I'm here, Howard. And Materazzi, the brain, also had him, we had him sort of triangulated.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, fine. Come to my house or come to the gas station, he said, at Pismo Beach on Spyglass Road at 12 noon tomorrow.
I love how he said that to you in the book because I read that and I'm
Yeah, yeah.
like, such a
It's totally
spy.
true. He's doing like this is tradecraft. He's setting up an area outside his house. And I get there, 20 10 minutes ahead of time, and this giant Lincoln pulls up. The window goes down. He's got sunglasses. He's like, follow me. And I followed him to his house, got out, and he immediately said, sit down. He just took control of everything. And I'll never forget, he took out his Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife, which he carried in battle behind the lines, and he started to open up the mail. And then he kind of had these like long Count Dracula like nails. They were just longer than normal, sort of going, with the knife, the tip of the knife, cleaning out his fingernails. It's like, hey,
My
you
God.
need to use the bathroom? I'm like, I'm fine, Howard. So I started to go on the attack, and I said, hey, what about the time that you were at, the bridge where you killed the guard? And he said to me, I don't remember if I used the silenced pistol or the stiletto. And it was just like, oh yeah. And then it
As
was
a
like we
matter of
brought
fact.
him back to his war. And it's an incredible story. This is a guy that, I mean, escaped multiple ambushes. He was captured by the Germans. I mean, I have one account where he literally is being marched back to SS headquarters, and he's in a ravine, and he is being marched back by a soldier that has a 98K a rifle with a bayonet on him, and he stops. And the bayonet goes kind of up towards his back, and he grabs it, and then he flips the guy over in a judo throw and cracks his skull. And then he is in the middle of a German, what's called a Restallamento, where the SS had the area surrounded, and there were soldiers everywhere. So what he did was he was of German descent. He looked German. Just sort of takes his uniform, which he was wearing, and tucks it down and looks like slicks his hair back and just calmly walks away from the dragnet and then escapes. But he is then, the next morning captured again. And what's remarkable is he pulls out what's known as a Stinger pistol, and it's a 22 caliber ballpoint pen. And he pulls it out after he was captured, and the guard is like, that's like a toy. And he knows that he's going to pull the trigger on his rifle, and Howard just throws it away and he runs for his life. And the back of his calf is grazed by the German bullet from that rifle. And I'll never forget, after I talked about the bridge incident, I said, "Do you still have that wound?" And he's like, pulled up, the his pant leg, and his calf has this giant scar from where the bullet had, grazed his leg. Incredible story. I mean, this book is filled with what these men saw and did. It's also a love story, with a double agent. They capture thousands of German troops, and it's all true. It's I spent years going through the archives and interviewing those that survived. I went to northern Italy to interview the men of the resistance and get their story. I mean, it's just an amazing story, and it's very much puts you there. It's written
Yes.
almost like a novel, but every bit of it is true. All the quotes, everything.
As I we have about a minute left, so I want to ask you two questions. If we go over, that's fine. But as we are headed into America 250, you have brought so much of our American history to life for so many different people. You've impacted so many lives. What does America 250 mean to you as we are celebrating the 250th birthday? First question. The second question is, this is going to be a harder one, I think. Out of everything that you have covered, every war that you have focused on with the special operators, is there one person that really just, I wouldn't say favorite, but is that top two person saying, this really impacted me, this really kind of pivoted me, this really changed my life?
Well, I would say that for the 250th anniversary of our country, this is the greatest country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Our greatest generation was the founding generation, and I say that with authority. I say that by I'll never forget. Asked a member of Darby's Rangers from World War II, "Are you the greatest generation?" And he said, "Patrick, what about the boys of 75, 1775, and
Yeah.
76
Yeah.
that fought for the cause?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're right," because it's about a generation that changes the world, that will change the world through freedom and liberty, which is more important now than ever
Yes.
because of all the things that we are facing. Everything from AI, which is about to explode and be incredibly disruptive to society, where core things that we were from the founding generation of freedom and liberty are all potentially very threatened.
Yes.
Um, and it's this generation that has to fight not only fellow Americans because it's our first Civil War, the loyalists who were, ardently believed in the crown, to the greatest empire at the time, in a war of 8 years that was by no means preordained. It's frankly a miracle that we somehow achieved victory. And we achieve victory, but we also create founding documents, Declaration of Independence, in ideals that will change the world and continue to change the world. And you asked what my, the transformative figure is.
Yeah.
It would be George Washington. And I,
Yes.
I love George Washington in the sense that he is the indispensable man of the American Revolution. And he has this incredible task of somehow keeping together Americans. They're just as divided as they are, today,
Yes.
then in many ways. And he somehow has to navigate this minefield and then somehow translates and takes what is in the halls of Congress that are being of freedom and liberty, and it is transported to the battlefield and how we fight. And there's an American way of war that is being formed that I talk about in Revolutionary Snipers, which comes out in November. It's very transformative. It's things that we, on how we fight today still. Um, and there's it's a very powerful. I've written three books on the American Revolution. The first one is on the Maryland line. It's called Washington's Immortals. It's the men that save America at the Battle of Brooklyn. And the second story is the men that row those men and the rest of the army somehow in the American Dunkirk across
Yes.
the East River, where the fog sets in and miraculously saves the country and the army in Washington. And then they row Washington across the Delaware. That's the Indispensables. And then the third book is the
Mhm.
Rifleman, which is
Yeah.
an incredible story. It's not been told. The best shooters in the world that are part of Washington's army.